Hello, everyone, and welcome to IFFGD's Research Award Winner Series, Where Are They Now? This program was designed not only to acknowledge this year as being IFFGD's 30th anniversary, but to also give us a chance to reconnect with some of our past Research Award winners. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Magnus Simréen, who was our 2007 IFFGD Research Award winner for Junior Investigator in Clinical Science. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Simréen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the award.
Yeah, so can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe where you're currently located and your career focus?
Yeah, I work in Gothenburg, Sweden. I'm a professor of gastroenterology there, and combine my research work with clinical work as a senior consultant at the Sahlgrenska University Hospital here in Gothenburg. I also have an adjunct position as adjunct professor of medicine at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, as well. So I have ongoing collaboration with the group at Chapel Hill as well.
Yeah, international focus there. So you
Yeah.
touched on a little bit that you're excited about the winning the IFFGD award in 2007, but can you tell us just a little bit about maybe how winning the IFFGD award may have influenced your research career?
I mean, getting recognition like this is very important to encourage you to continue to do research. So I guess that's the most important aspect of being recognized with an award like this, that someone recognizes what you're doing and indirectly tells you that this is good, keep on doing it. So I guess that's the most important aspect of getting an award like this. And of course, it also gives you visibility to other people in the area and again, increase your recognition.
Yeah, and like you said, just being recognized by your peers. And so, when we're talking about research, can you share with us just a little bit about your current research focus, maybe some of the current topics that you might be working on today?
Yes, so I've been, ever since I was awarded in 2007, I've been focusing on the pathophysiology of IBS in particular, trying to understand how pathophysiology, that is what we measure in the gut, can translate into symptoms in patients and how that then can be used to identify new treatment alternatives. And this is what we are currently doing as well, especially focusing on the role of diet, the microbiome, the gut microbiota and symptoms, and trying to establish new treatment options in this area.
Yeah, and I think the gut microbiota and honestly the diet for IBS is actually one of the hot topics right now. It's something that a lot of researchers are definitely investigating, and that's definitely an area where we might see more in the future. So when we're talking about that, what do you hope to better understand about some of these things in order to understand the GI conditions and how they affect adult and children population?
So what we are trying to understand better now is to really understand how the diet and the microbiota interact and how that can lead to symptoms. We don't think that the diet by itself is responsible for symptoms, and we don't believe that microbiome by itself is responsible for symptoms, but probably more the interactions between diet and microbiome. And today, the dietary advice that we give to our patients are quite broad and unspecific. We hope to be able to, in the future, be more specific when it comes to dietary advice and potentially decided based on objective findings in the GI tract. So we can assess the reactions in the gastrointestinal tract to certain food items, and based on that, give the patient specific dietary advice.
Yeah, yeah, and like you said, we know that all patients are very different, and so basically having a tailored approach to each specific patient is definitely something that I think even patients with IBS may really be excited about hearing because not all GI symptoms are expressed the same way amongst everyone. So we know that all research is really important research, and obviously it adds value to the community and to the field. But what would you consider being maybe your most successful research study and why?
I guess it's, well, I mean, it's difficult to choose, of course, but some of the most interesting findings from our group is probably a relatively recent one, where we identified gut pathogen, Brachyspira, in approximately a third of IBS patients and in none of the healthy controls that we studied. And we think that this is a quite important finding. There was actually an accompanying editorial in the same issue as this paper was published, with the title Brachyspira in IBS, a Helicobacter moment, which indicates that the potential of this finding. We need to do much more work to really understand how important Brachyspira is for symptoms, but I think this is quite important, and there will be more to come there.
It's definitely a start. It's definitely something to kind of get us going in the right direction of really narrowing down what's the specific cause of IBS and how can we really help the patients who suffer from IBS, because the symptoms can be very debilitating for the quality of life. And so when we're talking about your research and the acknowledgments and receiving the acknowledgments from your peers, what other research acknowledgments have you received in the past or even recently?
It's more, I mean, the most of the recognition is probably being part of an international community and have important positions in international societies, etc. I'm part of the Rome Foundation Board of Directors, for instance, which is I consider that a recognition, even though it's not an award. I'm also the Secretary General of the United European Gastroenterology. I've been chair of the scientific committee there. So these are, proof of recognition, I would call them.
Yeah.
So I think those are probably the most important, not awards, but proof of recognition.
Yeah, and when you talk about the Rome and you being part of their board, I mean, it's important for patients to know that Rome criteria is something that all physicians use in order to really understand GI conditions. So yeah, I do, and we do think that that is definitely a recognition to be proud of, for sure, because you're having a hand in how we work with patients.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you talk about research and what drives you, what motivates you to continue to do this, what would you consider maybe being the most enjoyable part about being a researcher?
What I find really fun being a researcher is to be a clinical researcher, to combine my clinical work with research work. So I get inspiration from seeing patients, get ideas from seeing patients. They tell me something, you should look at this and you should look at that, and that's very stimulating to be able to get ideas from the interaction with the patients and then to try to understand that in a study, better in a study, and to advance the field by interacting with patients and with other researchers. I think that's the most stimulating part of this.
Yeah, and being a researcher is all about answering questions, but what's better than answering the questions that the patients actually have themselves?
Great. Yeah.
Yeah. So we talk about research and we talk about how we are trying to better understand how IBS is related to each patient specifically. But what do you still see as being some of the gap needs in the GI field, and how do you foresee maybe your lab investigating some of the gap needs to fulfill them?
I think the biggest gap is that we understand very little about how these symptoms come up in patients. Why does one patient have diarrhea and another patient has constipation? We know very little about this right now, and that's probably reflected also in the lack of really efficient treatments for many of these bothersome conditions. So I think there are a lot of possibilities to improve our understandings there, and we need to really better understand how abnormalities within the gut translates to symptoms in patients. I think that's the billion-dollar task for us in the future. And if we understand that better, then we can also develop better treatment options.
Yeah, I love that. I really like how you said just the abnormalities in the gut and how it translates to the symptoms for patients. And it's like what we said here at the beginning of how every patient is different. And so we understand that obviously symptoms can be very debilitating for patients and the quality of life. So just what you're doing in your lab today and what you are working on in the future, it's definitely going to give and provide hope to the patient community that not only are they being understood whenever they say that these symptoms that they feel are real, but also that it's comforting to know that they have researchers who support them and are looking into better ways to help treat and tailor these treatments.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. I mean, it's important that we have research in these areas. There are other areas in gastroenterology where there are more money today and more funding and so forth. But I think since these disorders that we try to understand are so common and for many patients so debilitating, I think it's very important to continue what we and you are doing to really increase awareness of these disorders and increase our understanding of these disorders, because there are millions and millions of people in the world who suffer from these conditions.
Yes, yes. Increase awareness and increase education around these disorders. It's definitely key. So yeah, thank you to everyone who has tuned in to IFFGD's Research Award Winner Series titled Where Are They Now?, where we've had the pleasure of catching up with Dr. Simíren. And we just want to thank you too for, providing us with a little insight in this topic and sharing with us your journey through research. So thank you.
And thank you to IFFGD for awarding me. Thank you.